Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we are talking about Motherthing by Ainslie Hogarth. Now, when I tell you this book was a wild ride, I mean a wild ride. First of all, look at that cover. It's like beautiful 80s vibes. The art's just fantastic. This book, first of all, I'm going to read you the blurb on the back. It's so vague. So just to give you an idea of where I was going into it. So it says, I see it now. The contours of a plan, a perfect food, or rather a meal perfectly executed, which will revive that long buried instinct in Ralph to be alive. Despite the shock of it, to stay alive despite the pain of it. A food, a flavor, altered once by his Motherthing to make suddenly being alive all right. I can revive that instinct. I can replicate that flavor. I just need to grab a few things. So I read that and I was like, well, let's go. Let's go. Anyway, this is the book about a woman named Abby and her husband Ralph. The book opens up and Ralph's mother has harmed herself with a knife in their home in the basement, and they are going to the hospital and they are waiting to hear how she's doing. It turns out she doesn't make it, and that is very difficult for Ralph. He's someone who has struggled with depression his whole life, and this really throws him into a spiral. His mother, obviously, has also struggled with mental illness, and that's what's led her to do what she's done. And very quickly, Ralph begins to believe that he can feel and see his mother in the house. And the thing is, Abby's always had a really strained relationship with his mother. His mother's name is Laura. Despite the fact that when she met Ralph, she went into their relationship and she met his mother like ready to love her, because she had a very strained relationship with her mother. So she was like, yes, I'm gonna get the mother I always wished I had. But it turns out Laura just doesn't take to her, even down to like the fact that she has this beautiful opal ring, and she'd always told Ralph growing up, like, it's an heirloom ring. Like, when you find the woman you're gonna marry, this ring will be yours and you will give it to her. He brings home Abby and she's like, actually, you know what? I changed my mind. She does not get my ring. So like, even those things, she does not take to Abby at all. So now Laura has passed, and basically it's Abby trying to make her husband okay, like the back of the book says. You know, she is desperate to find the thing that will reignite his will to be in this reality with her, to snap him back down to earth. And what Abby wants more than anything is a baby. She wants a baby so bad. She's got the name picked out, Cal. If it's a girl, Cal. If it's a boy, Cal. In her mind and in her heart, Cal. And she is waiting for this baby. And that's sort of the basic synopsis. I wouldn't call it a horror novel. It's not scary in that kind of way. Like, is Laura haunting the house? Maybe. Ralph certainly seems to think so. But it's not that kind of ghost story. It's a deeply unsettling story. It's incredibly weird, which you know has been right up my alley lately. This was basically an unhinged woman dealing with her unhinged husband and her unhinged dead mother-in-law. So it's right up my alley. It's a 5 stars. Easy 5 stars for me. But if you don't want, well, I will say, so it's, like I was saying, sorry, I'm getting distracted here. My brain's going faster than my mouth is. It's It's not a horror story in that kind of way. It's more the story of two neglected people. Trixie's on the move. Two neglected people who want so desperately to have a family. And that's Abby and Ralph. Abby especially. She just wants a family. She wants to be a mother. And that's all I'll say if you don't want the spoilers. So if you don't want the spoilers, now's the time to beat it on out of here. And for the rest of you, let's get on into the spoilers. So what else can I tell you? There's so much to tell you. So Abby works in a seniors home where people go, to live out the end of their days when they don't have family to take care of them, or they do have family and family aren't equipped to care for them, or they're not interested in, you know how it is. And Abby loves working there, and there's one resident in particular that she's just crazy about. And they've really developed this bond, and the woman, Mrs. Bondi, I think her name is, she's become sort of she's at the point now where she can't really speak, but her and Abby have worked at a system of gestures so that Abby knows what she wants, and they've really got a close relationship. And Abby looks at her, she calls her my baby. To her, that's, until she has her baby, this woman is her baby. It's her sole purpose to care for this woman. Meanwhile, at home, she's got Ralph going through it. And he's no longer going to work. He's just sitting in the basement, rotting, basically. The same things his mother used to do before she died. And now one thing that's interesting that will come into play later is at the beginning of the book, when they're at the hospital waiting to hear the fate of his mother, a woman in a red dress comes up to him and gives him a business card, which turns out to be the business card for a psychic. And that will come into play later. So immediately after Ralph hears about his mom, he wants to immediately go to the psychic, but Abby manages to just get him home instead. So yeah, now he's going through it. He's not going to work. None of it. He's having a very bad time. Sorry. It's darkly humorous as well, this book, which I feel like the cover also plays into that pretty good. Meanwhile, at work, things are getting weird because Mrs. Bondi's daughter is coming in, and she doesn't like Abby in the way, the relationship that Abby has with her mother. And Abby can feel in her heart that this woman is getting ready to take her mother out of this care home, which is a very nice, more expensive care home, and move her into a more cheaper, not as good care home. So meanwhile, as things are getting worse and worse at home, and Ralph won't eat, he won't shower, he won't change his clothes, nothing. He is sinking into the depths of despair. Abby decides she's gonna go and talk to this psychic. So she gets there, she pays, and the woman's sort of channeling. She's there's something attached to you, a spirit, and she's is it my mother-in-law? And the woman's I don't know yet, let's see. Turns out it is. And she's attached to Ralph, and by extension, attached to Abby. And so she finds out, she's listen, this woman's not going to leave you alone until you can prove that you can take care of this man. And she's what do you mean? I am taking care of him. And she's you need to make him something. You need to feed him something. A meal that will satisfy this woman. You need to show your devotion to him. And she's what are you talking about? I couldn't be more devoted to this man. And the woman's listen, I don't know what it means. That's just what she told me. So you're going to have to figure it out on your own. So off she goes. Meanwhile, things are getting worse at work. The daughter of Mrs. Bondi, she's listen, we're getting her out of here, and I don't want you anywhere near my mother because you're a weirdo. You're too invested. Why are you obsessed with her? And so eventually what happens is her boss is listen, she's being moved. You can't go around her anymore. the daughter doesn't want you. You're being rude. Like, you have to stop. And Abby's like, listen, you don't understand the context. Like, she's terrible and she's being rude to her mother and I won't stand for it. And the boss is like, listen, it's none of your business, really. She's going to do what she's going to do and you have to be respectful. So anyway, there's also a bunch of like weird little things. Like, we get flashbacks to when Abby was a young girl with her mother, and like, she hasn't seen her mother in years. She doesn't know if her mother's dead or alive or what, because she doesn't even know anyone who would tell her. Like, she has no connection to her mother or her childhood. So we get flashbacks to Abby's childhood and the ways that her mother abused her and the many, many boyfriends that her mother went through when Abby was a little girl. And finally, towards the end, we get to a part where we hear Abby's mother when Abby's a little girl. So the current boyfriend is threatening to leave. And Abby's mother, in a plea of desperation, says, you can have both of us if you stay. Meaning herself and her small daughter, Abby. Which is just the worst thing you could hear your mother say. I mean, I can't think of anything worse. Now, of course, he still leaves. He's not interested in that. At least that's the impression I got. But still, she heard it. You know, she heard her mother offer her up to a man to get him to stay. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. You doing, Trix? Trix, she's just moseying around. Anyway, so we're learning about the trauma and how, you know, she never felt safe, she never felt protected, she never felt cared, she never felt loved. And so now that's all she desperately wants. And like, when she found Ralph, to her, Ralph is like the perfect, sweetest gentleman. And he's perfect and she loves him so much. And she wants her to get rid of her trauma and him to get rid of his trauma. And them to just have this perfect baby made of pure love. And then on Ralph's side, he had a very mentally ill mother who couldn't care for him, who he had to do so much of the caring for. And they just want love and peace and family. And so every time her and Ralph are intimate, she's like, this is it, Cal is coming. Cal's coming, and then she'll get her period and be very upset. And it's a whole cycle every time. So much disappointment, so much sadness. And so this is where things get really off the rails, and I think is very like metaphorical. She goes to the home of Janet, who is the daughter of the woman that she loves so much in the nursing home. And she goes to her home and she's like confronting her, and she's like, you need to stop, like, your mother's amazing, just stop. And Janet, meanwhile, is like, you don't know her. You don't know who she was before she was an invalid. You don't know what she's done to me. You don't know our relationship. You don't know anything about it. So I need you to back off. And as the conversation goes on, the daughter kind of has a bit of sympathy for Abby, because she can see, like, this woman truly cares about her mother. But anyway, Janet's not moving. She's not having it. Eventually, she's like, you need to leave my home. I'm going to do what I'm going to do with my mother, and you need to butt out. And in a last minute kind of, Abby had a knife in her purse because she had taken this knife from the house so Ralph couldn't hurt himself with it. And she pulls the knife out and she stabs Janet. And after she's done it, she gets an idea of, like, this is the meal I'm going to make Ralph. And so she cuts some of it off. She takes it home. She goes home. She makes a chicken a la king, but Janet a la king, I guess. And he loves it. He loves it. He can't get enough of it. And, you know, they both eat their fill. Later that night, he's seemingly back to normal a little bit. He's feeling a little more himself. And then the book ends the next day when they wake up and there's a knock at the door, and the neighbors there. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you was after his mother died, that ring I was telling you about, that the mother-in-law promised him for his future wife, but which she would not give to Abby, Abby took it off her finger. And so like when she's being cremated and everything, the funeral home's like, we don't have a ring here. And Ralph obviously is very like disturbed, like, where's my mother's ring? She never took it off. Abby meanwhile is freaking out because she knows she's taken it. She's buried it in their backyard. So anyway, there's a knock at the door. It's the neighbor. The neighbor's like, oh my God, this is so weird. My dog had this in his bed. And so we had learned that the dog had dug it up into the backyard, had taken the ring home. The neighbor found it, brought it back. So Ralph thinks like, my mother must have taken it off when she was gardening or something, and the dog stole it. So then it all works out, and then he's like, you know what, we should have a baby. And she's like, I think there's already one in there, because of course she always does. And that's the end. There's a lot of layers to this story. There's a lot to unpack. You know, aside from the literal things that are happening, there's also the things that are happening under the surface, like the trauma, Abby's childhood trauma with her mother, and the way that her mother would have literally given her away if it meant keeping a man, which is just the most disgusting thing that a child could ever hear or experience from their mother. And it literally makes my skin crawl and my heart ache to think that any child has ever had to go through that. And then it's, you know, the abuse that Ralph suffered at the hands of her mother, at the hands of his mother, who herself was going through so much. It's like these cycles of trauma, because someone's ill and then they inflict trauma on their child, and then it just gets repeated and repeated. And for Abby, she just wants it to stop, and she wants to be able to have a family that's just love. But of course there's more to it than that, you know. It's easier said than done sometimes. And I thought it was a great book. At first, the first chapter I was like, okay. But then once I got going, obsessed. I loved it so much. 5 stars. 5 stars. If you like those weird books, give it a try. Give it a try. You might love it too. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me for tonight, you guys. I finally was able to come and sit and film instead of doing the audio only book videos. I don't like them. I prefer to sit and chat with you. Anyway, I hope you're doing well. Let me know how your weekend was, and I'll see you again very soon in the next one. And if you made it this far, leave the, if there is one, I think there is, like a diamond or a diamond ring emoji. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye.